Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the spoiler talk for the Stephen Graham Jones novel, Demon Theory. This is going to be an interesting conversation.
So, first of all, in the event that you somehow ended up here before the episode, which would just be weird, it's the first time we're ever doing spoiler talk before we do a review. And really, the reason is I expect that Rob and Misty will explain Demon Theory to me. So, this could be like a 3 or 4 hour spoiler talk, and then we'll go back and do the review. Maybe I'll have a different feeling about it by then. But Misty, this is your first spoiler talk with us, so welcome.
Thank you so much.
And I'm going to let you guys chit chat for a little bit, and I'll pipe in with stupid questions from time to time.
Well, I was going to say this is spoiler talk 16. That's a Demon Theory reference. Nothing.
I muted myself. I was fully prepared not to say anything for the first 8 minutes of you guys talking about this book, just so I can kind of figure out what's happening.
So I guess to set the tone a little bit for listeners, I want to start with the history of us reading this book, because the book came out in 2005, 6, something like that. 2006.
2006. Mm-hmm.
Do we both have our copies in our hand? Is that what's going
I
on?
do.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's a book that's been around for 12 years. And as we mentioned on a previous episode, neither Livius nor I have read it until now. It's a different story for Misty. So what's your history with this? I know that Misty recently sent a picture to me and Jesse Lawrence with the inscription. Like, she had it signed by Stephen. And I think he signed it with the year, and it's 2006, right? Like, you had it signed the year it came out. So yes. You were on the Demon Theory bandwagon much longer, a long time ago, I guess.
Yes. Do you want me to can I give you the precious story that might take up most of spoiler talk, but I'll shorten it as much as possible about when I got him to sign this?
Yeah, I'm going to mute myself too. It's just going to be you all out on your own.
Well, it's a cool story, and the Velvet people who might listen to this already know it. But I was a member of the Velvet starting in 2005, which was the forum that was dedicated to Will Christopher Bear, Craig Clevenger, and Stephen Graham Jones. And so in 2006, I knew Demon Theory was coming out. He lived in Texas at the time and was going to be at the Texas Book Festival, which was in Austin, which is a mere 3 hours from me. And so my husband and I decided to go to the Texas Book Festival. Not only was Stephen there, so was Mark Z. Danielewski for House of Leaves, which was pretty badass. And so we went to Stephen's panel and his little reading, and afterwards they said that he would be in a tent signing books. So my husband and I go out there to get my book signed, and we wait and we wait and we wait. And to cut it short, in an hour, we found out we were in the wrong tent, and I had completely missed Stephen. And so we went back to the hotel. Mark's signing was not until the evening. This was probably at noon when Stephen's was. So I had 5 hours to cry about the fact that I missed my chance to meet Stephen Graham Jones and get my book signed. I was a little bit devastated. I really did cry. So we go to Mark's thing at 5 or 6 o'clock, whatever it was. And he is magical in his own way, and I'll leave that part of the story out. But he does his reading, and it's in this, it's in the second floor of a bar. It's tiny. I mean, the size of, Rob's apartment. But, no, it's a really small space, and it was crowded with people, and we had to get into a line to get Mark to sign our House of Leaves books. And my husband was standing off to the side holding my book bag that had some other books in it. And he starts waving crazily at me. And I'm like, what is going on? And then he points to the side, and Stephen is fucking standing at the bar. And so I immediately freak out, and I almost got out of line and that's when I knew I didn't really care about Mark. What I really cared about was seeing Stephen. I was willing to lose my spot for Mark Z. Danielewski for Stephen Graham Jones. But my husband gestured for me to stay. He went and talked to Stephen. When I got out of line, Stephen was actually at a cocktail table with friends But my husband had pointed out who I was. So when I walked up to him, he got up from the table and took me on my own to a separate cocktail table and talked to me. He knew who I was by my, my name on the forum, which was Story Star. And so when he signed my book, he actually said, Misty, hey, Story Star, really? Which was like the most awesome thing and the most beautiful moment ever. And that tells you what kind of a human he is, that he just left where he was at and focused on this hysterical fan who had driven 3 hours to meet him and get her book signed.
Thanks for listening to Spoiler Talk for Demon Theory. First of all, here's what I want to say. You said it was the most beautiful moment ever, which really makes me concerned for the rest of your life. So I want to find better, more beautiful moments for you.
Aw.
Yeah.
But it was so sweet. So awesome to do. I thought it was really cool. Anyway, yeah, he signed it, and he just circled one of the footnotes and gave me a little backstory on it, which was just that he doesn't know anything about film. So some of the footnotes in here that explain film shorthand, he actually had to research and learn on his own.
Mm-hmm. Now, excellent story. I've heard that before, but I like hearing that story because it's very nice. So I'm assuming you read the book then. Did you also read it multiple times?
I hadn't read it before. No, I'd only read it. I read it one time.
But closer to when it came out?
Oh, yeah. It was immediately around that time.
So we have someone who read this when it was like in the moment. And I guess like because you mentioned the Velvet being a forum to celebrate those three authors, Craig, Will, and Stephen. Was there like discussion and stuff like that? Like, I'm assuming that at some point, like there were people talking about it. So what I'm trying to establish is, do you have, more knowledge built through conversation about the book as well?
That I remember off the top of my head? No, I'm going to totally disappoint you on that question.
No, that's fine. Because
don't.
One of the things I was concerned about is like me and Livius having just read this book, just going on our impressions versus someone who's like the demon theory historian or something like that. So I was trying to see if that was the case or not.
It is not me.
All right, cool. Now I guess we have to talk about the book.
What's the first question?
Well, I guess it bears kind of noting what it's intended to, like how it's set up. It's not just a book. It's set up as a trilogy of movies, and it's the novelization of a movie based on the blah, blah, blah. So we could probably talk about that a little bit, if I remember it. Hang on. It's on the thing, right? It's on the first...
Yeah, it's a novelization of the film trilogy, which is adapted from an unauthorized bestseller, which is also inspired by some case notes by a doctor. So even the intro of what you're about to read is kind of packed with reference.
A little layered, yeah.
It's funny because that is the actual... For a lot of movies, that sounds like what actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So if you watch like an Oliver Stone movie on assassination, it's almost exactly what you just described. Like there's some loose collected notes from some FBI agents, and then that was turned into, a best-selling book that really doesn't have all the answers that then was made into a movie. So, I mean, that actually rings kind of true of some of the things that we do wind up seeing in cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think probably the simplest way to kind of explain this book to someone who's never read it is to, and I hope this is okay, is to compare it to Cabin in the Woods. Because I think basically what it is doing is, it is after Scream, which Scream, at least for mainstream cinema fans, was the first horror movie to really point out the cliches in horror movie and also try to get meta about it. And so it turns in on itself. And even though it's making fun of horror movies, it also does a lot of the same cliches. And I think Cabin in the Woods really turned that up on its head because it didn't like come into your face and say, hey, we're poking fun at all horror movies. It's way more clever about it. And it also spins it on itself so that it's not doing all the obvious things anymore. And it tells you it's using those things against itself. Anyway, that's what this book does. But back in 2006, and it also, whereas like Cabin in the Woods, if you haven't seen a bunch of horror movies, you won't understand the references. They don't explain the references to you. You have to have that knowledge already in your brain. Demon Theory, the book, it writes them out for you in the footnotes, if not in the actual novelization itself, which I think is actually something I wanted to talk about too, because I don't know if you noticed at first, all of the references to other horror movies are always in the footers, but then as you go, it will actually just say it's referring to like a video game or a movie in the text of the novel.
Oh, like in the later
screenplay
parts?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's an interesting observation. I don't think I noticed that, but that's fucking great.
So here's where I want to go with this, because I do think that we're covering some things like that. Misty for sure needs to be talked about in the regular review.
Okay.
In regards to like footnotes. I have a question for you guys, and Misty, I know you love this book, and Rob, I'm not sure where you land on this book yet, but in all honesty, because I thought about this a lot. So the book is we all know, and if you've listened to the review already, I'm sure we discussed this. It's written as 3 screenplays for a trilogy, and one of you guys just mentioned that recently. But I got to the end of the first one, and I thought to myself, could this have ever been made into a movie? And I thought, sure, I could see this being made into a movie. But as I got into the second part, and then I thought about it again in part 3, or the third movie in the series, those sequels would have never, ever made it into development, was kind of my opinion. And this is a little bit commentary on the way the story is told and stuff. But do you guys feel the same way? Could you actually see this being made into a trilogy of movies, even if the first one was greenlit?
That is a great question. And I think the one that really doesn't work for me as a final is the last one. The last one is so heavy on making sure you understand how the characters have been bleeding together from the first. It's so complex. I don't think it works anywhere other than a novel or like a written form where it can explain itself to you. I don't think they would, or I would be curious to see how someone would show that, I guess is a better way to state it.
It's a funny thing that you asked that question, Livius, because I can't tell you how many times as I was reading this book that I was thinking to myself, man, this would be so much easier if it was on screen as opposed to like being read. Because like one of the not necessarily objections, but troubles, the complications for me was like keeping the characters
for sure
separate, and like if I could just see them, it would be so much easier than like just every time I read a name, remembering back what happened in the first one and the second one.
Not just that, but who they might be from the previous. Yeah,
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That's one of the things that I spend a lot of time being upset about.
So personally, I wanted it to be, but you're saying, do you think that Hollywood would allow it to happen? I would say yes.
Or are you asking if it would work?
No, I was asking if it would even get made.
Okay.
My thought was like I got into the second one, and there's obviously some confusion about what's happening, right? Because you have these characters, but none of them are in the same roles that they were. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of like a movie audience going in and seeing the same actors playing. Some of them have the same name, like some don't, but none of them are the what were they? They weren't quite interns. They're medical students, right? But then none of them are medical students in the second one. Like at best, one's an EMT and one's a janitor, and you know what I mean? Like I just couldn't make the mainstream jump to sitting in a a Cineplex 16 theater movie thing next to people that were going to go and see this movie that made essentially no sense. Standalone part 2 of a trilogy made absolutely no sense. Maybe started to at the end of part 2. But definitely doesn't get laid out for you until the third movie.
Well, and maybe it's because it's made for that special film nerd, like a Jesse. Like it's made for a specific limited audience. It's not supposed to be for your run of the mill. I just go to see horror movies on Halloween.
Mm-hmm. And that, yeah. So art house films, I guess. Mm-hmm. But yeah, my thought was like I was picturing just the theater down the street from where I live, like this being on a screen. You know what I mean? Not an art house, but like something you see movie trailers for on TV, and I couldn't envision it.
So this makes me think of another thing I was thinking. When we got into the second part, I can't remember where in the reading of it that I thought this, but I was thinking to myself, man, I'm so glad that the story didn't just go from like shit goes down at the house to more shit goes down at the house. Like the transition to an entirely new environment was great. And even though like the story was confusing, obviously it was intentionally confusing. So, maybe not intentionally confusing, but intentionally not clear. And so like, the fact that like we went from one setting to an entirely different setting, really worked for me. And so, and this is a stupid comparison, but it's like the TV show Scream Queens, where it went from in season 1, the sorority house, to like season 2, the hospital. And it's like similar, you know, there's like echoes of things and you know, from one to the next, but like relocating it somewhere entirely different was a refreshing thing because you had different problems and stuff like that. So the strength, I think, of the second part was the fact that like you had an entirely new environment, entirely new problems that were going on, that kept, I guess, the horror side of it fresh while you were trying to figure out what the regular story was about.
I'm actually super happy that you made that comparison to Scream Queens, because that's another one where, yeah. And also, you're exactly right, and that is why it doesn't bother you that it changes, because there's something fresh about it, and you're newly interested in. Ooh, you know, you imagine what the movie Train to Busan. It's good because you don't think about, is it zombies in that scenario? Like at least they moved it to a different environment that you aren't used to, and kind of add something fresh to such an old monster idea. And yeah, no, that was cool.
Now, I guess we haven't really spoiled much yet.
No, I was going to say, we haven't spoiled a lot. We need to actually talk about the characters, right? Livius, is that the thing that is really confusing?
Yeah, I don't know that anybody can explain the character map to me. I picture that it would require like a TV detective show board with like the little red, you know, threads going to different things for me to get it. Like Rob has a thing on here saying, "Mom, did she get a name?" And that wound up being Nona.
Kind of,
right? Yeah.
It was, except I will say so. The final footnote.
Yep.
Does explain the initial story of the family in the house.
Yep.
It does tell you who was alive and who was dead in that house, and where the haunting comes from.
God damn it. That may have not been in my digital edition.
And so that's where, I almost wanted to make sure that you had read that final footnote, because if you're what is cool about this book is you don't have to read the footnotes to get the story. The story does run independently, and I can tell you that for a fact because I started skipping them. So I'm like, I've already read this book before. This is my second read. I don't need them all. And you don't. You can actually read the story and understand the characters and things. You will miss the juiciness of it, but it can run independently, except for that very last footnote.
So let me explain to you guys, and I will explain it again on the regular review, that the only footnotes that that were hyperlinked were the numbered footnotes.
Oh, so
whenever I would see the cross,
footnotes?
Yeah, the little crosses and the little whatever, nothing. And I just now am flipping through and realized that there may have been a lot of them.
That's probably at least half the footnotes, I'm guessing.
I would
Yeah.
agree. That's a
So
good
I will
assessment.
tell you that it's probably, Kindle, whatever, probably an average size font. It's got to be 20 pages of footnotes that I did not get.
So I
As I look at a lot of them, and a lot of them I saw when I saw the little crosses in there, I was like, okay, he's going to elaborate a little more on the Riggs Murtaugh relationship, and you could just tell what it was going to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, that last one, which I will probably read after this review, may help clear some things up. But yeah, we were going to talk about the actual problems with the digital version. I will say that as a problem because I was like, no, I read every numbered footnote. But then I decided to go in and look, and I was like, "Oh yeah, there are a lot of other footnotes that I did not read."
So, did you not get that final footnote? Because, it's a sub
Correct.
footnote.
It is a sub for sure.
That's rough.
Well, and what sucks too is the way if you have the physical book, if you're on the digital, you have to keep clicking on the number or the letter to get to the next one.
Yep.
If you have the physical book, it's laid out like a page. Like
Sure.
you just are just reading it straight out, and it's a lot easier.
Oh, is it not even at the bottom? Is it actually in the?
Well, it's just that some of them are there's so many sub footnotes
Sure.
that
I see what
it
you're
actually
saying.
lines up like a full page of text.
Yeah.
I gotcha. Yeah, that did not happen to me as I'm glancing at some of them, just kind of shuffling through. Yeah.
So, I'm going to. I want to. Because we're kind of talking about like the very end footnote, and I want to kind of play this out. My understanding of like all three and how it all kind of comes together, and see if like you guys agree or disagree. What do you think?
Bring it.
All right.
I'm going to agree with whatever you say because I have no information from which.
Bring it, because I will say that this time around, because I knew that it was going to get heavy, like thick, fast. I have sticky notes all through mine. I almost wish I
Wow.
had sent you a photo of how many sticky notes I put to track the characters and what order they die in and all kinds of stuff. So, yes.
So I'm
Do
going
it.
really like I'm really zooming out on this, but like the first one is just it's the first story. Like, this guy, he gets the call from his mom and they go to his house. It's Halloween. And then he knows that there's some evil shit. He knows there's like the demons or whatever that are there. But he doesn't tell anybody. They go there. They all start dying. And then it ties into when his his sister had her accident and then like cryptically maybe died, maybe didn't. And that's kind of like, but the twist at the end of the first one is that a couple of people he came up with actually aren't dead, but they're like ambulance people. So it's unclear whether like everything went down the way that we read it. Is that fair to say?
Yes, as it like almost makes you wonder either we have an unreliable narrator or we have some kind of a time warp issue.
Yeah. So
Well, and there's all the weird stuff with his dad too. Like it becomes really unclear, or at least through the course of the story, it's unclear if the father is killing them,
right, or something
or
else.
if a winged gargoyle is.
100%.
Yep.
Because we're made to believe that it's monsters until it's revealed that it could just be his dad, and everybody's like, "What the fuck? It's just your dad." But then it is monsters. Second one kind of picks up, with in the hospital. I think time has gone by, right? A couple of years or something like that,
It's a couple of months, isn't it?
or whatever it is.
Isn't it like Christmas?
Well, it is Christmas,
Oh,
and what's
and then
confusing about it is it starts on Halloween and then it jumps to Christmas.
So a couple months. Sorry about that. But like, so the thing about the hospital is, there's the baby, the weird baby scene, which is on Halloween, which is it. It sounded like it was the mother who was pregnant, and she was trying. I'm assuming she was drinking whatever it was, fuel, trying to like have
Kerosene.
kerosene to have a miscarriage or whatever, right?
Yes, and it was the mother.
Now, but she had like some sort of weird demon baby.
Well,
she
her body was burned to a crisp when she got there.
right? And we found out, was it this book or the next one where like the dad's like a crazy rapist?
I think that is this book.
Yeah. So the demon baby escapes into the sewer or whatever, and then and then starts messing with.
To the coma ward. It's the coma ward.
Well, it goes through a pipe or whatever, but then starts messing with the coma patients, and then like infects them and turns them kind of into demons or something. And then basically now it's like the hospital people who are the same people but different characters, kind of, from the first book, have to try and survive Christmas in this hospital with like now like coma demon people. And that the thing that I liked about this was that in the first book, the demons would drop down out of the sky onto anybody who was like out in the open,
Yes.
yard. And then the drop down thing carried over in the hospital because the demons were crawling around on the ceiling and dropping down onto people. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yes.
And then, oh God, I don't remember how does this all pan out? What's the ending of the second one?
Nona pushes the doctor off a roof.
Oh, that's right.
It ends on the rooftop. This is the one where Hale is in a coma the whole time.
Yeah.
Nona was the custodian, but she remembers Hale, and she also, because Jenny is reborn as some kind of like meta gargoyle, because she's a part human, half of the screenplay.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so and like she wants to get to Hale anyway. It's that kind of it's that.
I want someone to put this on the dust jacket.
What?
I want this whole discussion put on the dust jacket for the reissue of this book, so people will know what this book is about.
So I liked the pushing the asshole dude off of the roof. I thought that was good. He deserved to get pushed off a roof. Third book, it starts out with insert random group of teens going to this, like, now this is a couple of years. This is like 2 years later, right? Or 3 or something like that.
Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's now this house has got like some sort of like mythology to it. These random kids are going to go up there. I like the fact that they're back at the same like convenience store or whatever with the same clerk, and they're fucking with that clerk.
Yes.
But like the clerk has a horrible life because these kids always come around and fuck with him. Anyway, I don't remember exactly why they had the other characters, like Nona wanted people to go back.
Nona remembers.
Yes, Nona is a key, and let me tell you why. Why Nona remembers is Nona is always the one that has to survive. She's the mom.
Oh, okay.
At the end, like when you read that final footnote and you find out what had happened in the house, the mom is alive and her family is dead. And so that's why she's the one trying to put it together, because she's the actual witness. It's just that in real life, when they questioned her, she didn't remember anything.
Yeah. And so like the whole theme of, sorry, Livius, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is all making a little more sense now that someone's explaining the final footnote to me.
So, yeah,
yes.
The whole theme of part 3 is, in order to get this weird cycle of demon fucked upness to stop, they need to like do it like the first time, kind of.
Yes.
Is the conceit of the story. And so they're and that was kind of neat. Like they were trying to, last time, so-and-so did this. And like, that was kind of neat how like it kind of happened again and stuff.
Yeah.
But then it gets all kind of weird toward the end where they're like, this is a cycle. It keeps happening over and over again, and we need to stop it. And like, they're just kind of, it's cool that like they're pretty honest about the fact that they're speculating on how to stop it. They don't really know, because like that's a bullshit thing in movies where it's like, we must do this thing and then it'll all be over. And it's like, how the fuck do you, like, this is the first time this has ever happened to you. How do you know the answer to so I like the way that went down.
I do too. And actually, so Livius, like to fully kind of flesh out what I think is really going on, like what I think the last one is trying to tell you. So the core story is just the fact that family tragedy happened. This little boy accidentally crippled his sister, and she was basically dead inside after that, to the point that, and this is what is unclear, is whether or not the dad buried her alive or not. That's kind of implied in several of the stories.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why they talk about him breaking her legs to fit her into the hole, and that she was alive during that. So that has happened. And I don't actually, Rob, how did the dad actually die? The dad is dead.
I believe it was the cross in the back.
That's right. Okay, you're right. Okay, so the sister dies, and it's probable that the father killed her. The son does hang himself, and the father and mother have some kind of a conflict, and it seems that the mom stabs the dad, and then the mom just goes into shock. And that's where the authorities find her. So they just find all these dead bodies, and this woman is in an insane asylum for the rest of her life. But in the mythology of the third screenplay, even though that is the core story of the main characters, there's also additional stuff going on because the father was involved in Nazi experiments.
Yes.
And they messed around with his biology. And because he had a special genetic makeup, when he experienced this tragedy, he actually opened up a doorway to hell, which is how these demons or gargoyles came through, and they want the door to stay open.
Yeah.
So they keep fucking with this family in order to try and create a species of demons that can survive on Earth, almost.
Wow. So here's what I'll say. That all fits. No, it all fits. It's a little crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that one of the features that I liked, I want to mention this in spoiler talk. Like I overall, I thought the construction of the story, the overall story was actually pretty good. Although it was super confusing as to which character was which and stuff. And now, like I said, I have an explanation that's a little better than what I had when I closed the book after the end of the story without a final footnote. I thought it was really interesting that the thought was that this was happening in Stan's head over and over, that he was the one that kept doing this to them. Mm-hmm. But then they have the realization that it's Nona.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That it's in her head. I actually thought that was really, really well done, even though I wasn't really clear on maybe what was happening. The mm-hmm. transition from Rob kind of touched on it. Like, we know how to fix this. It's all in his head. And then finding out that they're all completely wrong was really a refreshing thing to happen towards the end of this book.
Yep. And this is another thing that it has nothing to do with the story necessarily, and more to do with the construction of how Stephen decided to tell this story. I think that he may have been trying to get as clever as possible. And so when he's thinking about horror trilogies, and he thinks about some of the things that studios do to try and ramp things up or keep the audience interested, mm-hmm. he also was using that in each of, so he had this original, conceit or idea or what have you, and then he's like, all right, let's throw in these twists and turns, and what would happen if we made this into a sequel? What are the things that would happen to this story if Hollywood got a hold of it and they needed to add some pizzazz? So I think he,
yeah.
But I really do. I think that he probably just had an initial idea, but what he wanted to do is also show you what happens to stories when the film industry gets a hold of it and they start doing things according to how horror is supposed to be told.
I honestly had that thought several times when reading this book, that exact thought. So I think we're on the same page about that.
Yeah.
I have a question for the two of you, and we'll start with Rob. So knowing all you know, and you've had a little more time to process this than I do, did this story happen? Or is this just Nona's crazy brain trying to explain away the things that happened to her family?
Oh, Livius.
I would... That's really difficult. At the moment, there's I can't think of the thing in the story that's telling me for real whether it happened or not. You know what I'm saying? I can't think of the one, because there's always, like, in a movie, there's the thing where it's like they flash something on the screen and that tells you for sure this did happen or it didn't, that kind of thing. And I can't think of the moment in the book that does that for me. So my answer is I don't know.
My answer is Steven would never do that to us. He would never pull that kind of fucking bullshit. Like, Inception, like, go fuck yourself. Christopher Nolan, if you think I'm going to believe that whole thing was a dream, that top is going to stop spinning, and Steven would never, ever tell me this was all a dream. Ever.
Okay. All right.
So it happened, is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
So then I have, and again, now more and more questions are coming to mind now that I have a little more information. But so Nona, though, being the mom, still somehow was envisioning herself in a much younger body, right? I mean, she couldn't be Hale's mom and Hale's girlfriend like at the same time, right? I mean,
I agree. It gets a little tricky in some of those. But then Jenny is an adult in the second one.
Yeah,
a hot adult at that.
And actually, that brings up something that I think I really appreciated throughout the entire book, is that there's several times where it's like a narrative script almost, because it's in like movie language, but it's a narrative, and so like there's several times where the narrative itself acknowledges that there's no way that what just happened is possible. And so like the fact that you have like Jenny, young Jenny, old Jenny, Nona being a different age, I think is just part of that, like, this is a fucked up reality situation that we're living in. And so I really appreciated that about the book, where it was like, at some points it was literally says, which should be impossible, is like the words that followed the description, and I was like, this is fucking great. This is perfect.
It is, and that's where I call it almost like Cabin in the Woods, because it acknowledges its own problems. Mm-hmm. It's like, haha, this really shouldn't work out, but it's the movies.
Yep.
The other thought I had pretty consistently throughout, when I was reminded that this was supposed to be screenplay-esque, is that this must be what those screenplays David James Keaton was sending in read like.
I'm glad you mentioned David James Keaton, because, like, to me, this is there's so many parallels. Candy? Yeah, I mean, like, if he hasn't read this book, he's just missing out, because, like, this is absolutely. I feel like Stephen Graham Jones is the only person who could possibly write something that David James Keaton would want someone to write for him, if that makes sense.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I did, because, I've read a couple of, whatever screenplay treatments, and it's like interior, dark room, classy house, and then some dialogue. And this was just like 6-paragraph bricks on a description of stuff, and then a line of dialogue.
Yeah, it's not your action dialogue. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true.
It's, yeah. So, what else? Is there anything else spoilery we need to kind of... And this is doing exactly what I wanted, because, like, it's kind of bringing, like, clarity and even ground, so we're not all on different pages when we try to go back and explain it to the listeners. But I think we got to the meat of things a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And so just talking about really quick, the footnotes, like Misty was saying, they're not necessarily to like understand what's going on in the story, but I will say that, like, did you guys read the footnotes as like an entirely different voice?
Yes.
Like it had a different personality than the rest of the book?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that.
So I thought that was nice. It was like
and it had a personality too.
Yeah. It was like someone's impression of what was going on, but like someone who cared about, at least, kind of setting the record straight about, like, something happens in the story and it's like, well, this happened in this, that's not original. This happened here and here and here. So I liked that part of it, because so often in books we speculate on if something was inspired by something else, and this book just kind of lays it bare. Like, a lot of the things that happened in the book probably were not only inspired by, but maybe even a tribute to, like, the things that it references, and that was great.
Yes. Well, I love that. So sometimes things happen on screen and we understand them because we've seen so many movies already that we're like, oh, when somebody inserts their fingers into his brain and start like their eyes roll back into their head and then we see a flashback, we know instinctually, we've seen it so many times before, them putting their fingers in that brain allows them to see this memory that occurred to some other human. And the footnote explains where that and why you know that as an audience. Oh, this is the you have a seizure-induced medium of communication, and you know this from all these movies that you've probably seen.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I have a thought on footnotes, and I have one other question that just came up because of Rob annotating our notes. Footnotes. It felt, and I could be wrong, and I'll be honest, I'm probably not going to go back and read all the footnotes, like they were getting more and more manic throughout the course of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, example, in the beginning it would say, someone would make a clever, they'll say, "I'll be back," and it would be attributed to Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator, right? But towards the end, it was like, this is from, as we saw in the movie Silent Night, Deadly Night, which shouldn't be confused with Silent Deadly Night, which shouldn't be confused with Night at the Roxbury, which shouldn't be confused with, it got really... like the person writing the footnotes was the same thing was happening to their brain that was happening to mine during the course of reading this, which was becoming mushier and mushier.
That's actually incredible. I'm so happy you pointed that out.
But also, like, a little sloppier, too, because, like, I know that in, like, the third part, I can't think of an exact example, but it would be someone says something or does something, and the footnote is, like... it references something similar enough where you could make a footnote about it, but it's not like a direct reference. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that was kind of neat.
Yeah. So the question I had, and I'll kind of elaborate for the viewers. We had a list of character names, and Rob added last names to the family. The main family is Ainsley.
The I'm real guessing, family.
Okay, so the Swearin, I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Sewren, Sewren, or whatever it was. So that was just fiction. I mean, like, okay, all right. Because I looked at those, I was like, why doesn't that look familiar? I was like, I was pretty sure it was like Swearin or something was their last name. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and actually
final
the
footnote, father is. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. The characters, the original family shares none of the names, first or last.
Got it.
There you go. That's it for spoiler talk, I think, because we all have to get to bed at some point tonight.
You guys all just, it's the first spoiler talk. I felt like someone spoiled the book for me, but probably in a better way. Like,
I think that'll wrap it up, right? Now we have to go like explain the book to people in a non-spoilery way.
Correct. Yeah. So
and I also already forgot what you told me.
That's okay. We're gonna bring it all together because we're a professional operation. So patrons, thank you for listening to what's probably the most convoluted spoiler talk we've ever done. And then, must be nice hearing one of your fellow Patreons on here. So, Misty, thanks for being our number one patron. We appreciate and love you.
Thank
you. Love you. Yes, love you guys.